and welcome to the Women Arise podcast. I'm your host, Neelley Hicks, and with me today is Vicki Brown, who is former news editor at United Methodist News Service. Vicki's going to be interviewing me today about something that recently happened in my life. Vicki, how are you?
I'm good, Neelley. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm so glad that you could be with us today. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and you'll guide this podcast.
Well, my first question is, I understand from a photo that was in the local newspaper that you were at a neo-Nazi protest in downtown Nashville, and that you talked to one of the men. So I guess the first question is, why were you there and what were you doing?
Yeah, I know. I got that question when the pictures started appearing, like, what? Why? How? But
Neely,
the,
do I need to put the cat outside?
no, don't worry about that.
Okay. I'm
Don't worry
sorry.
about it. No, it is totally fine. If we have a cat appearance, that will be really fun. So, anyway, yeah, so I went to a unity rally because one of my friends who is Jewish invited me and our interfaith group to be there. And this interfaith group I've been a part of for the last few years. And we have Muslim, we have Jewish, we have Christian, we have other people who joined that circle. And she also told me that she had received some hate mail in her driveway. Now, this is something that's been happening in Nashville for quite some time. And it's really odd. So people put, anti-Semitic flyers and pamphlets into Ziploc bags that are weighted down by popcorn kernels. And then in the night, they sneak out and they like throw them in driveways. And so it's such a cowardly thing that they're doing. But anyway, so Pat had been one of the recipients of a bag like that. And so when she invited our group to go to the Unity rally, I said, I'll be there. And so I went because of Pat and my other friends, but mainly I wanted to provide that friend support because she's dear to me. And so when I got there, I was waiting for her, and the neo-Nazis, which they like to just call themselves, they're Nazis. They don't want any adjectives on that. But they started walking up to the gate, and I had already walked through the gate in security, but I just felt compelled. I went straight back through the gate and walked up to one of them who told me his name is Joey. And I just said, what does it feel like to have so much anger in your heart? And he gave me a pretty authentic answer. He said, I don't feel like this all of the time. So it opened the door for me to continue talking with him. There were several guys there, and one of them was the ringleader, kind of carnival barker type, there to round up more attention on himself, more than anything else. And all of a sudden, photographers surrounded us, and I knew that it was being filmed, but I was so intent on interviewing Joey and finding out, like, how does this kind of hate start? Where does it begin?
Was he able did your conversation with him give you any insight into where he was coming from? Do you feel like you learned something?
I did. So, I asked him, when did this begin for him? And he paused and he said 5 years ago. And then he said, no, it was during the pandemic. And so he started going into like his life in Colorado and living there amongst immigrants. And so I could see how like hate creates more hate.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't just Jewish people, it was immigrants. It was me being a woman clergy person. There were all these different things that were happening around me. And so I did gain insight. And at the root of it is fear. They were really afraid that white men, white people are going to be replaced. And I know that the white replacement stuff, conspiracy stuff, has been going around. So I asked him, so are you procreating? Are you having like lots of white children? Um, and he kind of backed away and looked away. And then he said, I can't talk about myself personally. So I got the feeling that no, he's not doing that. And I, I did also say, because I asked him about his faith and if he considers himself Christian. And he didn't give me a clear answer on that. So I kind of think the answer is no. But when I said something about Jesus, and I said, well, Jesus was Jewish. Oh my gosh, Vicki, all of those guys just like verbally pounced on me and said, no, he wasn't. And neither was Abraham or Isaac. None of them were Jewish. So I asked, where do you get your biblical knowledge or history from? And one of the guys, kind of in the background, said there was a Bible that was published around the time of the Civil War. So I researched that, and there is a Bible that was put out by slaveholders. And they cut out large portions of the Bible to make their point about slaves being subservient and that, essentially to keep slaves in line, giving them Christian theology without, but really vastly watering it down. So apparently is one of the sources where they get some of their theology from.
So, do you think that you in any way made him or any of the other folks who were there question their actions or think about them?
Yeah, we never know what impact our words will have. And sometimes it is just a spark that someone says one thing and it sticks in a person's mind. And so I hope that that happened for more than just Joey. There was another man there who just looked frail and scared and vulnerable. And so I think people like that are particularly at risk of becoming a part of a group that tells them that they're powerful just because of their skin color. So that stuff was going on with Joey. The only reason why I stepped back from the conversation with him was because somebody came out and said, we're getting ready to start. You either need to come in or stay out. And by that time, I knew that my friend Pat was there. And so I told Joey bye. And when I did, he stepped back and said, can I hug you? And I said no, which I am a hugger. Um, and perhaps like if he had taken off that damn swastika shirt and laid it down and prayed with me or something like that, maybe I really would have hugged him. But I still was a little cautious. And so I think I shook his hand and said, Joey, I'm going to pray for you. And he said, thanks. So with that one person, I think, I saw crevices where light could get through, but, and perhaps with some of the others, but I think that the hold of hate can be so strong when you're around other people who are just affirming that you have every right to hate all these other people, whether they're immigrants, whether they're Black people, brown people, Jewish people, women who assert themselves in roles that used to only be held by men. I think that it just creates for them such a small window where they can love. So you're giving most of your life away to hate, and what will remain of you and who you once were? Because we're not born this way.
Did did any of them, particularly Joey, give you any specific thing that had happened to them, like they'd lost a job to somebody that they considered not qualified, but or anything like that? They didn't really. Did they really get that
He,
specific?
he didn't go into specifics, but I think by talking about the pandemic, you think about lockdowns. You think about like if you have a job and then you can't go out and do it, and you're home alone, you're angry about your job loss, about not being able to pay the bills, and then perhaps you get online and you
And
find
start
other
down.
people who are really angry. So that's where I think that conversation was leading. But it was also talking about the neighborhood that he lives in. And, why are there so many, as he called them, Mexicans there? And I asked him about that. Or he he said to me, why do they come here? And I said, well, I know why my relatives immigrated here from Ireland. It was because they wanted a better life. Like they couldn't have it in Ireland at that time in the 1700s. And he said, yeah, well, why don't they stay in their own country and make things better there? So we talked a little bit about that. And I think so if I had more time with him, I think it would have helped so much. And I regret not getting his full name because I would like to have follow up interviews with him, just because I think when we can understand where hate comes from, then we know like how to address it. Otherwise, we're just two groups standing on either side of a fence screaming at each other, and nothing happens productively from that.
Do you feel like, and I'm not in any way saying we should agree with anything that neo Nazis stand for, but do you feel like we make them the other in the same way they make their targets the other? And if we are, what do we do about it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think we do. And I think that's part of the human condition because, as you know, I've traveled around the world and I've been in remote villages where I thought, okay, in this village, these two groups. This was in Panama. These two groups of Indians or indigenous people. I thought, okay, they live peacefully with each other. I mean, they drink out of the same water. They live, and it was not like that at all. It was us versus them. So I think that it's it's apparent to me that whenever someone disagrees, they become the other. And there is this kind of triangulation that goes on where we then find other people who agree with our stance, and then we gang up against the other. And so I think that's part of the human condition. And I mean, there's relevant and realistic reasons why we would want to consider people who actively do harm verbally and physically to people who are Jewish, who are people of color, people who have different sexual identity, gender identity, and sexual nature. Like it was, they are against all of those groups. So for us, especially for myself, because I look out for people and I don't back away from speaking up for them. It's easy to just think those are bad people. Those are terrible people. And then you make them subhuman. And if you look at the rhetoric that's going on about people of color, Democrats, some people talk about Democrats like they're subhuman. We're the devil. We're demons. And that kind of language, I think, really is it's so childish. It's so immature because it's just so binary. Like there's this switch that we can flip when in each one of us, inside each one of us is a whole universe. Like nobody's ever walked the face of this earth with all the experiences
Exactly.
that you have experienced. So what makes us the way that we are today is a whole unique set of circumstances. I, being a pastor, cannot just look at somebody and think they're the devil. I remember when the Oklahoma City bomb happened, and then Timothy McVeigh was executed. I think the cover of a Time magazine had him deemed as the face of evil. And I remember thinking then, yeah, and you're killing him, but you're not killing evil. So I think there's so much more for us to learn about what causes hate. And then just like we've learned about trauma, and because, we might, in the past, people thought of mental illness as, okay, give you a label, give you a drug, whatever, you do this or that. And there is still those things are still needed. But with the research behind trauma, we understand that the bad experiences in our lives actually stay within our central nervous system.
Right.
So if it becomes a part of who we are, who our human fabric is, and there's ways to treat trauma, like why can't there be ways to treat hate?
Do I have been to some protest where there were counter protesters who were carrying hate signs, and often the organizers will say don't engage with anybody. Were you at all fearful when you went to talk to Joey?
I wasn't fearful at all. I felt compelled, and like my body just started walking. So that frightens some of the people who love me. But I did not feel fear. I did not have anybody say to us, don't talk with them. I didn't go out there to argue. I didn't go out there to shout back. And so maybe that's why, because there were security um, people standing behind us, and maybe they would have asked me to go back inside if I had been doing that. But I didn't feel fearful, and I think it's that drive because I'm a communicator. It's that drive to understand, because the more we understand, the more we know how to respond in ways that could potentially shift outcomes.
Neely, I know you've worked in Africa a lot, and particularly the DRC, where there's kind of constant conflict
Right.
at this time in the world. And have you learned anything from that work that you think we can apply in the United States to try to calm tensions and um, slow down just this sort of constant spewing of anger on Facebook and
Yeah.
everywhere else?
I'll tell you, the thing that stands out to me the most is I went to Cape Town, South Africa for a conference several years ago. And while I was there, I think the conference may have been in April. And so that was the anniversary of the Rwandan genocide. And so we watched a movie together, sometimes in April with Deborah Winger, and an excellent movie. And then two women, one woman actually spoke, Julianne Munyaneza spoke about losing 50 of her family members and going back into Rwanda to find her remaining family members because she had gotten a job in another country. So, so that point in time was really critical for me in thinking about this because another Rwandan woman whose name was also Julianne told me about a program that she led. Not sure if she's still doing it, but it was a peace and reconciliation program. And she said that they were told that there were not enough prisons to hold all of the murderers. That's what the government said, and that they had to find a new way forward. And so, one of the things that was being done, and this is what she led, was a peace and reconciliation program. And I asked her, what does that look like up close? Like, what happens? And she said, for 3 days, the killers and survivors come together and they bare their hearts to one another. And then after 3 days, they're assigned a project and they're given a piece of land where they will farm together. And I know that she also said that some of the killers were also rebuilding the roadways and other things, I think alongside others. But in that interview, she talked about how this one woman had lost her family, was working alongside the killer, and then she started developing empathy for his family because he had lost everything. He was not able to feed his family. And so this lady started caring for his family as if they were her own. And at that time, I remember thinking, okay, there is definitely a God because this is not humanly possible. Um, so I've seen that. And also at Robben Island, where Nelson Mandela was imprisoned, they had former guards and former prisoners working together to provide tours and do these things together. So I asked my tour guide, who was a former prisoner and had just told us about horrendous things he lived through. I said, so why are you doing this? And he said, Nelson Mandela said that the country could not move forward if we did not forgive. And so that shifted things because he said that he had been really so angry at how he and others had been treated. So I mean, those are two stories that I think, two ways that I've learned.
Okay. Just one more question. You mentioned South Africa, and obviously they had the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to deal with the legacy of apartheid. Do you think the U.S. has failed to address the legacy of slavery? I know that's kind of a hot button issue now, but
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because, I mean, after the Civil War, I mean, people started romanticizing the war. And, like these forsaken heroes and all of that. And oh my gosh, can you imagine America today if it had lasted? I mean, for one thing, why would they hire any white people if they could get free labor elsewhere? I mean, I think that's one rationale that I've thought of telling people who lament the loss of the Confederacy. But we've never dealt with it. And if you look at Germany and how they have recovered after World War II, stepping back from the Nazi regime, I think theirs has been a healthier process than ours ever has been. Everything, all of the romanticizing about the Confederacy has just led to continued anger and oppression of people of color.
Okay. All right. I think I'm out of questions unless
Okay.
there's something else you want to say.
No, I think this is great. And I will be writing about this. So anybody who's interested, just check back. And once that comes out, you'll get an alert if you subscribe to the Harper Hill Global YouTube channel. Or you can go to harperhill.global and subscribe to our newsletter. So please do that. Please consider also giving a gift to Harper Hill Global so that we can continue doing podcast and advocacy and all the things that we're doing here in Nashville and around the world. Thank you so much, Vicki.
Oh, well, thank you for the work you do, Neelley. I really believe you're making the world a better place.
Thank
So,
you. I believe you are too,
okay.
Vicki. Every step, every step.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Talk to you later.
Okay.